Okay, I'm going to introduce you guys first.
Yes. Start.
All right. All right. Anarchy versus limited government. Bell versus Helfield. All right. We have Eric Bell. He's the host of of the Philosophy on Freedomizer Radio and the Magic Button on Liberty Movement Radio. And we have Jan Helfield. He's a TV and internet interviewer who reveals contradictions in how politicians and journalists thinking. He's a staunch defender of freedom and will be arguing in favor of limited government. All right. I guess Bell, you have 10 minutes to make
15.
your case, or 15.
Yeah.
All right. I want to start by thanking Jan for agreeing to debate with me, and for Kwan for agreeing to moderate. By mentioning that I am a fan of a lot of Jan's work, and I do credit a lot of his work in leading me to question the legitimacy of governments and its rule, and that is actually one of the many seeds that led me to becoming an anarchist. My position is that every man is an end, means an end unto himself, and that you are the person, you are the highest authority over your own life, and that the government does not have it, that no person has his right to enforce their will on you or take your stuff, which is what taxation is. And I do not believe that if you were to grant any individuals or group of individuals the power over that life or any legitimacy, or that they would just that they would be able to keep them stay limited. And I think the United States is the perfect example of that. And I think if the United States was a DRO or some other type of defense agency, whatever you want to call it, rather than a entity that is a government which has its power to tax and to force people to pay for its product rather than provide through market sources, then it would have gone out of business by now. But and that is essentially my arguments. And actually, how much time do I have left?
13 minutes.
13 minutes. And I should say, if the system without it, I can honestly say, my opponent will try to say this will lead to gang warfare and chaos and just mayhem for that. And I will say that I do not know exactly how this system would what would exactly happen. I don't know what the market would provide or how this works, and I will say that he doesn't know either. But I do not think this would that chaos will be inevitable. Those are only results for that. And I would just reiterate that he does not know that either. And I think that's all time I need.
All right.
Okay. Thank you both for joining me on this debate. I would like to say that I sympathize with anarchists because I also am being abused by the government, and it makes me angry that the government is abusing our freedoms in many instances. But the important thing is not to be so angry that you can't think straight. And I think that's what happens to a lot of anarchists. So I'm requesting that you try to hold off your anger. For example, when I debated Kinsella, he was so angry that all he could do was insult me throughout the debate and use ad hominem arguments. And so I've noticed in the comments section of my interviews and debates that a lot of the anarchists are very angry and they're so angry that it makes it impossible for them to reason. So what they need to do, in my view, is be able to meet the arguments and follow the reasoning, and if they disagree with me on something, they should identify the premise that they disagree with, and or the lack of logic in the argument. And if they can do that, then we can have a good debate and go back and forth. So because the anarchists are so angry, and because they believe that the government is not legitimate, they don't join me and other people in the libertarian movement in fighting against statism and the public policies that are encroaching on our freedoms. So part of my reason to have this debate is to see if I can persuade some of them to join me in that fight, instead of simply saying that everything the government does is wrong because it's a government. They basically think that the government itself is immoral per se, as such. So of course they're not going to support a freedom candidate or freedom policies, because if it's a politician, he's going to go into the government, and the government is evil by nature. So that's one of the things I want to discuss today. This is a debate on political theory. So basically, when you are discussing political theory, you're discussing which social organization is superior, which one is better. And the anarchists, many of them think that they're not proposing any system. Yeah, they are proposing a system where there is no government. It's a radically different system, and they have to meet the arguments as to how things would probably be under anarchism. They can't just put aside this whole thing by claiming that nobody can know what's going to happen in the future. Fortunately, we are in agreement as to what our political end is, which is both of us think that our system, I think limited government, will optimize the protection of the individual rights of the citizens. Eric thinks that anarchism will optimize the the individual rights of the citizens. That's the debate. So we both have to make the case based on which we think are the arguments for that system. And in the case of anarchism, it's not exactly a system, it's the lacking of a government, the no government that they are arguing for, and that is a specific kind of social organization. So the first rebuttal that I'd like to make is that the government, a limited government, can be ethical. There's no reason why a limited government cannot be ethical, because individuals have the right to delegate part of their right of self-defense to a social institution. They can delegate their right to acquire major military force to an institution, and they don't have to delegate all their right of self-defense, but because they can defend themselves, but they can delegate to the social institution the right to defend their individual rights. With that purpose, they can do that legitimately. If all the people do that, they all delegate to the government their right of self-defense to defend their individual rights, and the right of that institution to have a monopoly on major force, so that they promise that they're not going to acquire major military force themselves. If they all do that, the result is a limited government. And there has been no transgression in any place in this whole process. So That's the first thing that I would refute. A government is not immoral per se. Now, the the second thing I'd like to say is that the issue of, well, let me back up. I wanted to say that historically that's what happened when we had a constitutional convention. There weren't any people that were advocating anarchism at the time. They were disputing between limited government and monarchy in general, and in the convention, different varieties of limited government. There wasn't anybody proposing anarchy. But now we do have people that want anarchy, like Eric, and we have to respect their right to decide what they think is the optimum social organization. Now, the question of how to deal with people that believe in anarchism today is a different issue altogether than in what is the optimum social organization and whether a government can be moral or not. There's a lot of governments that are immoral, those that are imposed by force. But the one that I just described, limited government, it results from the free agreement that people do freely. So it's based on mutual consent and the consent of the governed. So the situation with anarchists today, I want to deal with them fairly without violating their rights. And the first thing is, of course, to recognize their right to persuade other people of their view. And if they get a majority, then they can dismantle the government and they will have anarchism. Now, in order to do that, they're going to have to do more than just say, I don't know how things will probably be under anarchism, and nobody knows. They're going to have to make the case that under anarchism, things will be better, that their individual rights and ours will be more optimally protected than they are now, or with a limited government. That's the case they have to make. And in order to do that, they have to meet all the arguments that I put forth in previous debates explaining why anarchism devolves in gang warfare and incentivizes criminality, and people can't know what the law is, and it's the law of the jungle. And I'm going to go through that, if I have time, again, through the premises. Now, you cannot make an argument like Jeffrey Tucker does, which is say, things could not be any worse. No, things could be a lot worse. This is a fallacy. A good example of people that made that mistake were the Cubans. They were under a dictatorship, standard, simple dictatorship. They thought things could not be worse, so they jumped into the hands of the communists, and things became a lot worse. So you have the burden of proof to refute the arguments that I make. You can't just hide behind the idea that nobody knows, or I don't know how things would probably be. Once you take away the government, there are certain effects, certain results. Once you have, the people have the right to make alliances based on their shared values. They're Islamicists. They want to have an alliance with other Islamicists to defend their rights. They want to adhere to Sharia law. The Mormons want to adhere to Mormon law. The environmentalists want to adhere to environmental law. The Black Power people want to adhere to their view on race and society, etc. You have a whole bunch of different views and different legal codes and a whole bunch of disputes between them. And what started out with the idea that the anarchist has, that he will only have to follow a law that he agrees with, ends up with he's going to be ruled to death by so many different factions and legal codes. Nobody would even be able to know to what law they're exposed and how to prevent going afoul that law. So the other mistake that they do in this argument is that they say, look all the bad things that governments have done. And they list all the atrocities, all the people that have been killed. And then they attribute to limited government those things that other kinds of governments have done, which is totally invalid. It's like saying, look at all the atrocities human beings have done. Therefore, all human beings are no good, they're all bad. No, that doesn't follow logically. So that's part of how they try to load the boat. And they think that by not saying that they can know how things will be or probably be or whatever, that they don't have to defend their position. But it's totally self-refuting. If you cannot say how things will probably be, nobody's going to buy into it. You won't persuade anybody. So the other thing that we should do is respect the right of the anarchists to buy land in the United States and transition into that area where they become a supermajority and then secede. I would back that, and I'm all in favor of that. Partly because I would like to have the same right myself for those of us in this mixed economy that we live in today, where we can also, if things get even worse than they are now, more encroachments on freedom, and go farther towards socialism, that we would be able to buy land and transition into a part of the United States and then secede. And that's why I'd like to grant the anarchists the exact same right. Now, many of the anarchists are not interested in, they say they don't want to have their own anarchist society. They don't want to move anywhere. They say, I'm perfectly happy where I am now. I just want to be able to follow the laws that I agree to. I didn't sign the Constitution of the United States. I didn't sign any contract agreeing to these laws, and therefore I should not be obligated to follow them. Now, the reason why we cannot accede to their wishes is for this very simple fact, and it's the reason why people that have such a radical difference of opinion about how people should organize socially cannot live together. It is the fact, this fact. It is impossible, not that it shouldn't be done, it's impossible to have a given territory where the law applies to everyone there, and at the same time, it does not apply to everyone there. It's impossible to have a territory where there is a government that is empowered to enact and enforce the law, and there is not a government that is empowered to enact and enforce law. So you can't have both. It's impossible. So there's only one solution. Since both these views, no government and some government, cannot be integrated. It's impossible to integrate them. There's only one solution. You have to segregate. And so, since the anarchists are a very small minority of the whole population, probably 1% or less, they have to segregate to some part of the United States and secede. That just like if the limited government people are a minority, they're a much bigger minority, they would also have to transition to somewhere in the United States and secede. So the other thing that I wanted to mention was that many anarchists are anarchists because they don't understand NAP. They think that NAP requires them to be anarchists. And let me go make a few points about NAP. First of all, this principle was identified by Ayn Rand. And the name that she gave, what?
Time's up. 15 minutes.
I'll take 2 minutes extra. She said, and she called this the non-initiation of physical force principle. The context of that principle was that there was a limited government, and the purpose of the principle was to identify who is violating whose rights. So this was useful. It's a useful principle. It's a true principle in that context. It doesn't necessarily apply in a state of nature where there is no government. And also, I failed to mention, it doesn't apply either when you're under extreme duress. So you have to understand when the principle is applicable and when it isn't. And you also have to understand the relationship between this principle and the rest of your ethics. You have to integrate your ethics because knowledge is hierarchical. And the purpose of this principle is to protect the judgment of each person, which is required in order for them to maintain their life and have the optimum opportunity for a happy life. That is the hierarchy. So if you want to apply it properly, you need to know where it fits in the hierarchy, and the anarchists don't. And that's why they contradict themselves when it comes to situations of extreme duress. They think that they have to sacrifice their life and suicide them and commit suicide. They think that it applies to a state of nature where there isn't a government. This principle is useful and important to serve as a guide for the government to when they're enacting and enforcing law, and for the citizens also when they're dealing with other people. And implied in it is that you should be pursuing your self-interest, and how that is related to maintaining your own life and having the best chance of a happy, satisfied life. So the last thing I want to say is that a limited government
Time's up, John.
optimal.
Time 2 minutes
Limited
over.
government is the optimal political model. It's an ideal.
Jan, 2
And
minutes
how
over.
close you get to it is what's important. It's not an either-or situation. Okay.
Okay, so I guess it's my turn to ask some questions.
Yes.
Okay.
It's
All right.
all
Yes. Does the government have the legitimate authority to tax? Or any entity?
Yet it does have the legitimate authority to tax for the purpose of protecting the individual rights of the citizens. That's the only proper purpose for which it can tax.
Okay. How does it have that authority?
When, as I described before, you create the limited government, you have delegated your right of self-defense to the government to perform a function. The function is to protect the individual rights of the citizens. In order to perform that function, these people, this social institution called the government, they need to be paid. They will have expenses. So you, who are commissioning them to protect you, are obligated to pay them what's required to perform that service. Just like when you hire a security guard, if he has expenses, you have to pay him, and yeah, you have to buy his gun or whatever. Exactly the same.
So, since you did not move out of the U.S. yet, then did you give your consent to the current government you live under?
Did I give my consent?
To the current government you live under, because you did not, because you choose to have residency here.
There was a government when I was born in Connecticut, and so I was born into a system that was created more than 200 years ago, as I said in the Constitutional Convention, where a limited government was created. Now, I have not signed any document that says that I consent to this, nor lately, when I became 21 years old, I didn't have to sign a document. And I'm perfectly amicable to, if this was an important issue, for people to sign whether they agree or not. But it's implied by the social organization that we have that the people here believe that in order to have their rights optimally protected, they need a government. That's what they think. That's why they created a limited government. Unfortunately, we have transitioned to some extent from a limited government, and these deviations make the benefits of a limited government lesser. The more you deviate from the model, the worse things get. To this point, it's still, in my opinion, better than anything that would happen under anarchism. So, yes, I consent to this government, even as it has deviated from the original model.
Do you know how the market would provide for each government service that you would like to privatize?
Do I know how the market? I didn't hear your question too well. Can you repeat
Do
it?
do you know how the market would provide for each government service you would like privatized?
Which government service did I say I wanted to privatize?
Yes, I guess would be any service that other than protecting your rights that the government does.
Oh, you mean like education, which I think is not a proper function of government?
Mm-hmm.
Do I know? I'll tell you, since it's not a protection of rights service, you don't have the problem of people having enormous amounts of military might and going at each other and destroying the country. So there is no particular problem with having education provided through the free market, which I totally agree with. And since I believe in capitalism wholeheartedly, and I think it's the only moral system, I would be in favor of it. And I wouldn't know exactly the ins and outs of all the details of how it would happen, but I would know in principle how things would work out. I know in principle there would be a variety of people offering different educational services that the individual consumers would choose. And if that happened with a security, providing security for the human beings, where they had various militaries doing the same thing, as I said before, when they had disagreements, all that would happen was that there would be a mini war and it would ruin our country. That doesn't happen with education, and that's the big difference here. People don't realize that when you're dealing with force, it is a totally different situation. And if you decentralize the force and you have a lot of competing armies out there and competing military technology out there trying to outforce each other, all you're doing is creating a recipe for disaster.
Okay. Well, I guess that does kind of answer my second question. I was about to ask that, but I'll go ahead and ask it again if you want to have some more, do a little more, expound a little more. Is like if you don't know how all these services would be provided, though the ins and outs of everything in education could be anything else from, I guess, from transportation or charity, whatever. I guess why would you expect the same? Certainly the same. Why would you hold anarchists to the same standard when they say that everything should be provided by the markets?
Well, let me explain that. I'm glad you asked me again, because this is the Jeffrey Tucker defense. You ask him, would the various security agencies or PROs have different legal systems, legal codes? He says, I don't know, and nobody can know. Well, let me tell you something. I know that the educational services that would be offered would not be all the same. They would not be all the same price. They would not have the same rules. They would not have the same strategy. I know that for sure. You see, that's the difference. I'm not shirking my responsibility of advocating the privatizing of education by claiming that who could know all the particulars? Nobody's asking anybody in the anarchist community to tell you exactly how everything is going to be under anarchism. I'm just asking some basic, simple questions that will result, that stem from once you get rid of the government and there is no central monopoly of major legal force, what happens? Some things do happen and we know they happen, just as we know things will happen if we privatize education. Does that answer your question?
Of course, yeah, I'll address that, I guess, in either your questions or my rebuttal. But so how many questions do I have left, Quan?
6.
6.
12 questions you can ask, right?
I thought it was 10.
It's 12, but it's okay.
I took out different notes because it said 10 minutes before, but you said 15, and now it says 10 and 12.
No, that was the only change we did in the format.
Okay. The setup that is okay. And basically, okay, I would ask this: is it conceivable? Is it inconceivable that a DRO would have to have answers to your concerns and mainly in effectiveness and fear of abuse before they would go into business?
Would the various DROs have different sales pitches?
Or say, would they? Is it inconceivable?
And everybody knows that. I don't know why the anarchists are afraid to say that they would have different legal codes or different rules and different requirements and different sales pitches. It's obvious.
So they would have to address your concerns, either both effectiveness and actually defending your life and your liberty and property. And they would have to just be able to prove that they would not abuse their power and become warlords over you before they would come out of business. That is conceivable, right?
I think some of them would probably do that, and I think that they would offer different strategies. I think I've explained this before, but I will again. Some of them would probably say, look, I'm going to defend you if you follow our moral code, our legal code, no matter what anybody else says. And I got the firepower to guarantee it. Now, it's an expensive deluxe service. You're going to have to pay up to get our protection. But once you have our protection, we're not going to abandon you. You got it? Now, a different DRO will say, well, look, we have a more cheaper version. We think we don't want to go to war ever. We're going to try to resolve our differences through arbitration. And if you happen to have to go to jail even though you didn't violate our legal code, well, that's one of the risks you're going to have to take. But of course, we're pretty cheap, so we're giving you some protection. And there's going to be everything in between those two views. And there's going to be some with that won't even have guards. They say, well, we don't even like to use force ever, so we try to resolve everything amicably. And the criminals those are the first ones that they pick off.
Well, yeah. Again, I'll hold off my response set for your questions or my rebuttal. But I guess more. I'd like to explain. Here's more. Since you said that the anarchists misapply the non-aggression principle. What is it? What is it in its proper context? One more time.
The anarchists don't understand how the principle was constructed. Let me give you like a quick digest of how it's constructed. you have a lady, Ayn Rand, and she's viewing how things are under limited government, and she's noticing that in this case, one guy put a gun to this other person's head and took his wallet. He said, "Give me your wallet or I'm going to blow your brains out." The other guy did not want to voluntarily give him the wallet, and he went against his own judgment. He would have preferred to have kept the money, but he couldn't follow his judgment because he was being threatened with violence by the initiator. So she noticed that, you see? And then she noticed another case where a lady didn't want to have sex, and the guy had the knife to her throat and said, "Well, you either have sex or I'm going to slit your throat." And then she saw another case where somebody wasn't following their judgment. And she saw situations where the government was doing the same kind of thing, and the people weren't able to follow their judgment. So what she did was, through induction, she said, well, there's a common denominator between all of these things. And it occurs to me that the way people are forced to act against their judgment, which is essential for them to be able to maintain their life and to have an optimized possibility of a happy life, is that they are being forced to go against their judgment. In all these cases, the initiator of the force is the one responsible. He's the one that's violating the rights. So she created a nice rule that permits us to know who's violating whose rights. Both guys are in a fight, but one of the guys started the fight. He's the initiator. He's the violator of the rights. The other guy who beat the shit out of him, he's not an initiator. He's not a violator of anybody's rights, even though you could say, under Knapp, some people would interpret, well, that's aggression. See, the word aggression doesn't clarify the issue. The issue is somebody's an initiator, and that's the guy who's violating the rights. So this principle permits us to know who is the violator of the rights, who we should support, and who we shouldn't. And so when the government is going to enact legislation, they should follow the same principle as well, for the same reasons. Okay. Did you get a general idea how it works?
Yeah, I don't see how that principle allows for a government, but I guess I'll let you. Think I have about one more question. I'll let you clarify that one more time. I'll let that be my last question.
Well, the point is that the principle is not at odds with the government. In other words, you can believe in limited government and also believe in the principle that it's wrong to initiate physical force, because you know what is the context. The context is that there is a government. This is one of the things that the anarchists are doing, is they're committing the fallacy of the stolen concept. If you want to read more about that, you can read Objectivist Ethics, or the chapter in epistemology on Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. What is happening here is that a principle that was created in a certain context, that there was a government, and she was proposing and supporting a limited government, is being used to undermine the context from which it grew, from where it came. That is the fallacy of the stolen concept. Because if that context is not valid, you cannot create the principle. You can try to create a different principle, not the one she created, which has to do with when you should use force in a state of nature. That's a whole different issue. And in my personal opinion, depends a lot on how prevalent predation is. But that's fantasy on top of fantasy, because we don't have a situation where there is no government. The world is divided and cut up into countries, and they all have governments. So that was the context. Now you can't use a principle that was formed in a context to invalidate the context, because the context is what made it possible for the principle to be constructed, to sprout. You got it?
Let's see. So is your argument basically that, well, just that Ayn Rand created it and she had envisioned that with the government, so to speak, but of course that's essentially what your argument is?
No, it's not about authorship. It's about understanding what facts of reality were integrated by the principle. The principle was not constructed or attempted to integrate facts of reality in a state of nature where there is no government. You see? You can do that, and maybe there's an analogous principle, and it's an interesting theoretical discussion which has nothing to do with how we're living today, because there is no context where there is no government. But that's a whole different question. You follow? It's not this principle of Knapp, what it referred to, the facts that it attempted to integrate, have to do with how things are in the context of a government, preferably a limited one.
Okay. I think I understand. Don't agree with it, but I understand. But I guess that's all my questions.
Well, ask me something that I'll try to clarify whatever you don't understand, because I appreciate the fact that you have a philosophic inclination, and I think it's a worthwhile thing to try to understand. It's not simple. You cannot digest all of epistemology in one shot, in a few quick minutes. But I'm giving you the leads. If you want to read the book, Objectivist Epistemology, you'll be able to see how concepts are constructed and what the fallacy of the stolen concept is. And you'll be able to then, by implication, apply in an analogous way how principles are constructed and why the same procedure essentially occurs in the construction of proper principles that are true.
Yeah, it's not that I don't understand it, it's just that I don't know how to really go back and forth without breaking the format, which I'm only just supposed to ask questions.
Okay, well, you want to refute some things that I said, then you have a refutation time.
Yeah, I'll wait for that. Maybe get then your questions.
Okay, so is it my turn to start with the questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, under anarchism, since if I asked you, would the DROs have nuclear weapons? I already know. You say, I don't know. So
I'm going to go for both
that's a joke. I don't ask that question. Since there's just two possibilities. Either they would or they wouldn't. So let's analyze them one at a time. Okay? Let's assume that the DROs did not have nuclear weapons. Okay? You probably heard this question before. If Kim Jong-un or Putin, any tyrant out there with nuclear weapons, and there's a few, sent your city a ransom note saying, an extortion note saying, you either pay us, let's say $1 billion or 10 billion, depends on the size of your city, or we're going to nuke you. Do you think that city, and let's say it's your city, so to make it personal here, should your city try to collect the funds and pay up or not?
Well, first I want to say that I don't think that scenario is very likely, because I mean, you could say that this case can just as easily happen for a country that has nuclear weapons. Could do that just as easily with a country with the governments that without nuclear weapons, but that doesn't happen very often. And second, I don't think that would really happen so much, because without a government, without a central authority, though, I mean, there's really no surrender in that case. I mean, some might pay, though, and some might, I don't know, hire a very elite assassins or whatever to take out Kim Jong-un, or maybe go to another, maybe go have some connections to another DRO with nukes. So I don't think that it would be. So I don't think it would be very likely. That's my answer.
So, moderator, I asked a yes or no question, and he didn't answer whether he thinks his city should pay or not. All that he did, instead of answering, was make a whole bunch of arguments about how he thinks it's improbable or it wouldn't happen or that, which I'm happy to argue with him at some other part of this debate. But I would like to know, does he think that his city should pay or not? Because it's very simple. Either you pay or you don't. What do you think what would you suggest that they do? What is your recommendation to your fellow members of the city? Pay or not pay?
Eric, answer the question, Eric.
Okay. But with everything, I'm going to still just give emphasis on everything I just said, there being a problem. I would say no, they shouldn't.
Okay, so you would not pay. So no. you would then just commit suicide and be nuked, right?
No, because there could be some other scenarios like with that. Because I could maybe, of course, as I mentioned, maybe go to another DRO in a maybe different area with a nuke or something, or I could hire, or should maybe someone, or I could get some elite assassins to go take out Kim Jong-un. So, I don't know.
So I wouldn't pay. Would send you the note, and they're going to give you X amount of hours. You're going to pay. You're going to say no. We're not going to. You send them back the note. No, we're not paying. That's your judgment. And so you think, in the meantime, you can get these elite. Good luck trying to get some elite assassins into Soviet Russia. I mean, into Russia, or into North Korea. And you think that's so easy to do? Good luck with that. But so you would decide not to
find some other way means to defend myself.
The scenario is that the DROs do not have nukes. That's the hypothesis. That is the premise of the question. So you would just get obliterated because they would nuke you. And I'm going to tell you...
That the risk is there, yes. I would take that risk.
You would take that risk that they nuke you. Now, if you didn't pay and they nuked you and you would be dead, when they sent the extortion note to the next city, you think they would pay or not?
You think they would pay?
Yeah, what's your opinion on whether they would pay or not once they saw the first city get nuked? Because their assassins were still in the airplane by the time they got nuked.
Well, I think they should pay. Well, that's very hard for me. Well, I don't know. They would probably prepare for it by some other means, either by start contacting other DROs with nukes or something. They would do something. I don't know. And some might have.
Right. So you don't know whether they would pay or not pay, but what would you recommend them to pay or not pay, even though you're just there in spirit?
Well, I don't think it would be a very viable option for anyone to pay in circumstance. No.
So you would recommend that they not pay and join you in the here and after.
Which I don't think that possible. Like there's a very that is a certainty though, and that is my opinion on that.
Okay. Are you familiar with Genghis Khan's strategy when he was creating his empire, he did exactly essentially the same thing with the city. With the cities, he would surround them and send them a little note. Give me all your gold, or else I'm going to kill every goddamn person in this city. In the first city, guess what? They didn't pay. And you know what happened? Afterwards, he went to the next city. And guess what? They paid. Don't you think similar dynamic would occur when the first city, the second city saw that the first city was obliterated? Wouldn't they quickly pay?
Yeah, some might. I mean, I can't really predict it. I mean,
Okay.
get a certainty, but some would. Some might pay. That's a certainty. But then I would just ask, Luke. I mean, you could make the same case with just countries with governments that do not have nukes. I mean, that can easily happen. Like Kim Jong-un could easily do the same with them as well.
I
But
would
how
like to
often does that
discuss
happen?
that with you. Let's leave that for discussion, so I will explain to you the difference, but that's arguing a different point. Okay, so you had told me that your ultimate end was happiness. You recall in your interview with me? With
Correct.
my interview with you?
Yes.
And so, would you be able to achieve happiness if you got nuked?
If I got nukes. No,
Nuked. Yeah, like you chose to get nuked rather than pay. Would you be able to achieve your happiness?
No, I wouldn't. But I think with this, if they were to do that, if they're able to, if I gave in now, they probably would just keep on after me with the threats afterwards. So it would not be good either. It'd be worth taking that chance.
So, but the question was whether you would, under your choice, did you achieve your happiness?
You want a simple yes or no answer? No, I would not if I was nuked.
Yeah, you would be dead, so that's impossible for you to have a happy life or be happy or whatever, right? Okay, so that your action would be in conflict with your ultimate value, your ultimate end. So, you know, I would review that. Okay, so if they, let's say, examine a different issue. Under anarchism, do you think some criminal gangs will extort money from weak individuals that are not organized, as well as security agencies they consider weaker than themselves?
The possibility is there, yes.
Okay, so under presently, when the government's in charge of security, everybody can call 911, and they either do a good job or bad job, but in principle, they're responsible for protecting people. The people would not be able to do that, so there would be more people exposed to these extortions and robberies by the criminals when there wasn't a government than when there is one, correct?
For those unprepared, yes. You
Right.
could say that.
Right.
But of course,
let me ask you another question. Do you think some of these security agencies will fight back and create a little war? So sometimes the criminals might miscalculate, they might not cave.
No, I mean, I would say no. That was definitely not the optimal goal of that. I think there's probably going to be, I mean, maybe 100, maybe 1,000 steps that they would probably take before that. And I think if there were, I guess, laws in competing that would cause, I guess, wars. If that's contentious, it'll probably be easier to change, much easier than we have under United States with the drug wars and such. So I would say not likely, or I'll go with that. I would say a more likely no.
So you think that some of these security agencies will not fight back? Is that your answer?
You say within competing agencies?
No, I
Or is
say
that just
we were talking about these criminal gangs
criminal gangs?
that are as I said before in my opening statement, there's increased predation and increased criminality,
Sorry.
and my question was, do you think some of these security agencies will fight back and create a little war? Is it yes or no?
I should apologize. I thought you were talking about competing agencies.
No, I'm talking. I want to deal first with the situation of the people that are dedicated to crime, criminal gangs that are predators, and say, "Oh, great, there's no government now. Let's go."
Well, I think they would.
Some of them. The question was, we agreed that some of them that they would attack the people that they thought were weaker. My question here is, do you think some of these security agencies that these criminals thought were weaker, would some of them fight back and create a little war?
Would fight back to defend people against the criminals? Yes, I don't know if there would be a little war or how that would be, or how much the carnage would do that. But I would say they would fight. I can see defense agencies fighting the criminal organizations. Yes.
So they would fight back.
They would. Yes, I can see. Yes.
Okay. So would.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So you're perfectly happy having these skirmishes in the streets of your city with various people bringing in the criminals would try to bring in more criminal gangs to help them, and the security agencies would try to bring in the other security agencies. Some of those security agencies would say, "Oh, war is expensive. We don't want to do that." Some would say yes, and so you have a little mini war there in your city, and you think
you would be on this scale of
that circumstance?
I don't think it'll be on this. There has to be the same scale of a small war, so to speak. I can understand people would organize to protect themselves against crimes the same way. I guess the same way you would probably expect, just under your limited government scenario, just for a cops to or police force to protect you from criminals. The same way.
Well, maybe let's deal with this situation. When there is a government, criminal gangs are completely outgunned. That means there's no incentive for them to buy tanks, attack helicopters, because all that does is make them targets for the police and the government. But if the government is removed, then they have a chance to acquire military hardware and outgun some individuals and DROs. My question is, will criminal gangs be incentivized to acquire military hardware so they can prevail over these people, those individuals and DROs, and have a greater pool of potential victims from which to expropriate wealth by force?
Well, I think the better question is, would there be people that would have an incentive to sell to criminal gangs with that? And I think that's more likely the situation that would more likely prevent that is probably whatever weapons manufacturers or wherever might be ostracized for from giving to certain to giving to so from giving to for selling to for the mafia, or just I guess or just shady DROs that would go beyond their bounds or whatever. But would there be incentive for them to try? Maybe, sure.
So you agree that they would be able to extort more money from people having, if they had attack helicopters and tanks, assuming that we're under anarchism and there's no central government, it's legal for them to acquire these weapons, even F-16s or whatever they can afford. And to the extent that they acquire these this military hardware, they would have a much greater pool from which to extort, right? Because now they are more DROs would have to submit to their request, or would not oppose them when they attack their clients because they couldn't win in a battle with them, right?
Well, not necessarily say they would automatically they're automatically get there because there's no law. Like I mentioned, of course, I would imagine that in this case they would be ostracized from the community by other arbitration networks or whatever. The same what you do with other criminals, that would be common from and no one would buy or sell from them. And that would not be very optimal.
So you, just to clarify your answer, so you think that the criminals would not be able to get their hands on any surplus military hardware from another country or from this country or any place else, even given the track record that they are notorious for being really great at acquiring weapons illegally? You think they wouldn't be able to get anything? Is that your view?
Well, we would probably find some checks and balances. The market would find some way to, but hopefully not minimize the case of having tanks in the streets by the mafia or the Crips or the Bloods or whatever. But I can see at least the society would probably stop that some way. So I guess so. Yes. Answer your question.
Okay, so there is an incentive there, and they would get a greater pool of victims by increasing the military hardware, and this would increase
the market's incentive to stop them, though.
Well, yeah, you can pay through the roof, like I said before, through the nose. Sorry. Anyway, my next question is: under anarchism, will people make alliances with people that share their values in order to be protected, to have their individual rights protected? Since there's no more government, they will have to assume the responsibility of protecting themselves. So would they make alliances with people that share their values, like Islamists might get together and have an alliance amongst all the Islamists that are committed to Sharia law, and all the Mormons would get together and have an alliance that would favor Mormon law, and the Black Power people, like I said before, would do the same, and the White Power people, the Aryan Nation people, and the PETA people that want to give rights to animals, and the environmentalists. And so if that were the case, would there be a variety in an anarchist state? Would there be a variety of alliances and security agencies with different codes? Because there would be different security agencies that would appeal to different people with different codes. Some believe in common law, other in Napoleonic code law, Japanese law, whatever law, French law, who cares? It would be, would you agree that there would be, thus, in an anarchist state, a variety of legal codes of what the law is. And
Yeah. Yeah. I think in this case, the market would probably do so. Would probably let many of those dwindle down if they were just unforceable. If those would eventually lead to many wars, as you would suggest. Many of them, so they would probably drop off. But there would be multiple ones. Yes.
I didn't follow. Are you saying that I didn't understand your answer? You're saying that that when the people organize, the Islamicists that believe in Sharia law, when they got together and they had their 500,000 people in that alliance, the market would do what to them? Would
Well, for
they
many of
have
my
military
most
hardware and they have their little army, maybe not as big as some security agencies, but much bigger than others. What is it that the
all of them,
market's
I
going to do
think,
to
because
eradicate them?
war is not very desirable from that to be the first option. Though I think many of those that are just unenforceable or that would inevitably just leave no other option but war would essentially they would dwindle off. They
No, I
wouldn't
didn't ask you
exist.
about war. I said that they
Or
would they would have different alliances and security agencies would have different legal codes, right?
yes, there would be different codes. Yes.
So you see how it's possible to get to know how things are going to be under anarchism if you just try.
Oh,
Anyway,
okay.
uh, will security agencies representing peaceful citizens have disagreements that are not resolved by arbitration? And will some of them use force to try to impose their judgment?
Well, by disagreement, my agreements.
Will
Um,
security agencies representing peaceful citizens have disagreements not resolved by arbitration? And will some of them use force to try to impose their judgment?
say rarely. I would actually like an example of that case, but
Okay,
um,
I can provide an example here. Say you have two very big um, security agencies. One where the they're uh, Christian fundamentalists, I guess, and they believe that abortion is murder, and let's say close to half a large percentage of the population of the United States agrees with that. Then you have another one or two different agencies that believe that a woman has a right to choose whether to have an abortion or not, and one woman, uh, she has an abortion, and the security agency that thinks it should be illegal to have an abortion and it is murder, uh, arrests her because she's committed what they consider to be murder, and take her to their territory or their compound or whatever and decide to put her on trial. Now,
mm,
uh, I assume the other, let's say, different scenario.
well, in that case,
Let's say the other DRO that thinks that she should be free to do that. Let's say, for example, because there's all kinds of possibilities. Let's say it's smaller, weaker than the one that took her and arrested her. What would they do? Would
Well,
they?
I don't think there would be like cases like abortion and other, I guess, social issues like that. I don't think that would ever come to that, and actually being arrested and using force against them. Just
So you don't
I
think
think
that they would follow their conviction and arrest this lady because they think that she's a murderer?
no. I think you proved that with your interview with the. Hold on, let me answer.
Go.
With in your interview with Rick Santorum, is like many people don't see that as actual murder, though. Even the staunchest pro-life people. I mean, occasionally, yeah, you do have some that I guess that may take it to extreme and may try to blow up abortion clinics and maybe assassinate doctors. But the general population generally would not seek that, and does not even. I don't even think they even think.
Okay, well,
In the
let's say
same
they
way as actual
arrested the
murder.
doctor. Since you want to go to Santorum route, that the doctor is the murderer, but the lady isn't.
Right.
Let's say they arrested the doctor. What would and they were going to try him because they think he's a mass murderer.
There are other options before that, like this.
No, but my premise is
Yeah,
if
which
they
you, of
arrested
course.
him. Now, what is the agency? The weak agency that the doctor is associated with. What are they going to do?
I think that court would essentially just lose its legitimacy at that point, and they would be.
The one that arrested the doctor?
Mm-hmm.
But the doctor would be in jail and he would be put in trial and go to jail, right? Or I'm asking you,
If they would do that, I think
what
they
would
would
his
be.
agency do if they were weaker?
As for that, I would say they would go to I guess, other DROs. They would have other, and they would sue them, or they would put them, and then everyone involved in that DRO that has him in custody would be ostracized from the community at large. At the end,
they wouldn't resort to force.
like, I don't think that case would be that would ever
Okay,
go
so the doctor
to
is
court.
he's screwed, right? So he has to suffer the
No.
punishment.
Well, I can go give you what I think would happen in a scenario of abortion in a stateless society if you like, but I don't think it would go that far with actually them arresting people. That's just me.
Okay, so let's suppose that it's because your security agency is just going to give up the doctor and say, well, we're going to ostracize you in the future and whatever. But let's say that the doctors, the security agency is a little bit stronger, and they think they can rescue and take the doctor out of there, and they can prevail if they fight it out. Would they?
Would they? Would they if they would? I don't see why they would necessarily go use violence the first option. Why they wouldn't work? Why the non-violent solutions wouldn't work first? I mean, if they're ostracized community and no one can give whoever's involved with this DRO that has the doctors in custody food or water, let them use the private roads. I mean, I would see how they would automatically just let the doctor go.
They're supported by millions and millions of people. What are you saying? They have plenty of people to get them food and water. Anyway, so you think that nobody would resort to force? Now, I gave you you asked me about what kind of defense agencies there would be, and in my view, there would be some that would collect a big fee, and they would say to the doctor, "Hey, we don't care who grabs you. We're going to go out and rescue you, and we're going to fight if we have to, because we are really powerful and we got a great military. And that's why you have to pay so much." So in that case, would they try to attack the other DRO and rescue the doctor?
Only if that case, if you were to have any illegitimacy, and they would essentially be, I guess, the mafia or just or just essentially warlord, they might, yes. Which I think there would be many steps they would take before that.
You think that
Very
is
rare.
mafia?
Or they be common criminals, whatever
You
you
don't
do.
think that they're protecting the doctor's rights?
You're talking about, or we were talking about the other. I thought you meant the security agency that has them in custody, though.
No,
After
I'm saying that there's various possibilities. You have the doctor could have signed up if he was a cheapskate with one that couldn't get him out. But if he was smart, he signed up with the security agency that said, "We're not going to leave you hanging. We're going to make sure that we rescue you and get you out of wherever you are." Would that DRO or security agency respond with force?
maybe. But no, like I asked you earlier, my questions though, I think from this, before them to get in business, so they would have to provide a way of being effective and protecting you, and not eventually becoming warlords over you, and also I think they would have to, in order to have any credibility, they would have to provide, I guess, some agreements with other. We would have to ways of solving disagreements with other DROs in cases like this. That would not mean violence in it, because who would want that to be the first option? So do you think they would have that's really their first goal in all situations? In the first course of action is to use force.
So you think that defending your customer's rights and guaranteeing his security is a warlord gang style security agency? They're committed to.
Said that.
They're not committed to criminality. They're committed to defending people's rights.
Well, the general. Office. I mean, of course, you wouldn't follow this.
And using force if need be. I mean, of course, if they can persuade the other DRO to hand them over without using force, they would. But they have a commitment, aren't they? People of their word. You were saying to me.
Right. I'm saying that might come to that, but I mean, just like you wouldn't for just in your view of limited government, you wouldn't want that as your foreign policy to automatically go use violence as your first in action, right? And so they would.
That's a good
try to work something out.
Right? Question. Too bad you want to ask me that.
Yeah. Okay. That's right. That's okay.
Question.
Well, just think on that. Just think on that.
I'll throw that one in. I'm going to answer it because you asked me, even though it's out of turn. But
that's fine.
What I expect from my limited government is that if we are attacked, they're going to goddamn defend us, and not going to say, well, let's go for arbitration or something. I mean, it's action time, and if we get attacked, we want a response from our limited government that will defend us and use physical force to do so without trying to negotiate with a predator who is attacking us and violating our rights. That's what I would expect a limited government to do. Of course, not to be involved in a whole bunch of interventions that have nothing to do with defending your individual rights and defending the United States. But if we were attacked, absolutely, we better do like we did with the Japanese. Fight back. We're going to negotiate with the terrorists or with the imperialists or the totalitarian dictatorship. Good luck. Anyway, that's my answer. So let me ask you this. You think it's always morally wrong to initiate physical force against someone else, even under extreme duress?
I would say yes.
Okay, so
Very good.
you've heard this question before. I've asked, if you were dying of thirst, lost in the woods, you couldn't find any other place to get some water, you came up to a well there that had water, the guy wouldn't let you uh, borrow any or buy any, and said he wasn't, that was his property, and you had no other choice, and you were ran out of energy, and so you were sleeping in the woods, waiting for him to, resting in the woods, waiting for him to go to sleep to see if you could sip some water. Would you would you violate his property rights and try to get to water and survive, or would you just wane away and die?
Well, well, I think from in this case, like as I think we've mentioned this on my show, that's on the last interview, that it'll be my principle that I do not have right to his water, and I think I would not go for that. I would maybe go find my chances some other place. That would be the right thing, the right thing to do in this case. But and I would actually say these are one of the which are called lifeboat scenarios, emergency cases, which are not very likely to ever come to these cases. Which Ayn Rand talked about these and said that you should not build an ethics around these cases like this.
Right.
These emergency scenarios.
But are you going to answer yes or no whether
Well,
you
I
would try
said
to steal the water
I
or
wouldn't.
not?
No, I said no.
Okay, you would die.
I would try if I would try. I would go somewhere.
The premise of the question is that there isn't anybody else around. There aren't any more houses, and that you'll run out of energy. You could hardly walk, and you're dying of thirst. So,
yeah, for those cases, I mean that would not be the right thing to do. That would be the right thing for me to do. I would say, but I mean, do I always follow? Am I always perfect? Do I always follow my principles? No. But I would say, but that's yeah, but that would be, of course, the right answer for me to do would be, I would say no. But again, these kind of scenarios are not what you build ethics around, because these cases you would not find someone with not like an empathy that would not give a dying man water or let person fall. I mean, or try to shoot a man off a flagpole when he falls off a window.
Well,
and yeah,
that's what Walter Block said he would do. Well, I thought it was ridiculous, but anyway.
It's of course. I mean, of course, you got my answer is no, but
okay.
But yeah,
and I think it's very revealing that.
There's principles now.
So I think I ran out of questions. I think I've asked you 12.
Awesome. All right. It's an interesting conversation. All right. 2 minutes of refutation. Eric, you can refute. Jan.
Okay, so I go. Oh yes. All right. Right now, I don't see. I would say that I do not, in terms of the non-aggression principle, I do not see how a government could exist, at least on his scenario, at least in his case, where it exists without people, without initiating force. And I think if you use it in this context of using duress or whatever, because he fears that bad things would happen, is you essentially just throw it out, and the non-aggression principle becomes meaningless in that case. Because I mean, we mentioned education for this example. If he thinks that there'll be hell if I don't pay for a court system or a military, and of course you can make the same case that it can be hell if we have stupid people, and that we have to pay for education. And the same thing for just about or the environment or protection agencies. There are many hosts of things that he does not believe that the government's legitimate role is. So that can be very subjective. So it leaves the door open so that the non-aggression principle can just that the government do anything. In this case, I do, as I mentioned earlier, I would say for that, I mentioned just in the last case where he used this lifeboat scenario of the water or a case. These cases generally do never happen. You would not find someone that is lacking empathy that would let a dying man just die without water. And so it's not really proper to build an ethical theory or a political theory or just any philosophy to deal with life. And ultimately, all these cases, as we mentioned, these scenarios, evidently, I don't really know how exactly will work. As we've mentioned before, I cannot centrally plan freedom, but I don't know what technologies that will be available by the time we get there. And so that's my point. But I do not believe that it is chaos. That is my answer.
So my turn?
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Well, the first point here is that it doesn't make any sense to make a big effort to find out what you should do and then go ahead and violate the principle. Like you said, you weren't perfect, you might violate your principle. The whole purpose of identifying the proper principles to follow is to follow them so you benefit yourself, so that you can live a good life. If you make an effort to think through what principles should I follow and then you disregard them, you're only harming yourself. If you have an integrated ethics, if you're following your ethics would lead to a better life, a happy, satisfied life for yourself. But in two instances here, you have made choices that deny your ultimate value. In other words, you're saying you would do things that would go against your ultimate value, your happiness. You said that you would let the Kim Jong-il nuke you rather than pay up. So your means do not result in the ultimate end that you say you have. In this case, at first you're willing to die from thirst, and because you don't hold that principle properly. The whole issue, Ayn Rand said that emergency ethics is not where you create the bulk of the ethics. The ethics that you're going to need almost always. And she's right about that. But it is true that the best ethics possible will also include what to do under rare situations, like under extreme duress. So this is the thing that you're missing, because you missed the context in which NAP, or the non-initiation principle, was created. It was created assuming that you're not under extreme duress. It was created when there is a government. And far from being incompatible with there being a government, it depends for its creation, for its nature, for its construction. That was on there being a government. That was part of the context on which it was identified. If you want to create a new principle that applies to the state of nature, go ahead, put it out there, and we'll see if it makes any sense. Unfortunately for you, it really is irrelevant, because there aren't any situations where there is no country and there is no government. But anyway, this is a mental experiment. You can go ahead and do it. But that's a different principle. And I told you, probably it's not going to be the same as the non-initiation of physical force. It's going to depend on a lot of factors, if it's a smart principle that advances your life. So one of the important points is that I have said that the fact that a government can deviate from limited government doesn't mean it's not a good ideal. The closer you are to the ideal of limited government, the more benefits you will reap. The more we stray from limited government, the less benefits, the worse our life will be. So it's not a matter of either or, whether it's perfectly limited and all of a sudden it didn't continue, it deviated from that. That doesn't prove or disprove that limited government is the best model or the best ideal at all. It has no bearing on whether it's the best model or not, because you reap the benefits depending on how close you are. It's a goal that you strive for to be closer so you get more benefits. So you know where you need to end up in. What is the best optimum place? And it's not anarchism. Anarchism will lead to your destruction for all the reasons that I've raised in all the debates, that all the negative consequences that the anarchists call horror stories, and I call the logical consequences of the premises of removing the government. Like you said, you couldn't know what will happen, and then all of a sudden you couldn't know. Why? Because I'm pressing you to identify the obvious fact that Jeffrey Tucker would not admit to. Why would he admit to it? Because he doesn't want to defend anything, because he thinks he can throw mud at the limited government, and nobody can throw mud at his anarchist system because we don't know how it will be. But in fact, all he did was prove that it's no good, because he can't even put forth how things would probably be. So nobody's going to buy that cake. You can't sell it if you can't make a pitch for it. Anyway, that's my time up, I think.
Okay.
All right. Summary, 3-minute summary of your position.
Well, when we say we don't know what the answer is, because that is the logical. That's the actual answer. It's not a cop out. It's just truthful. If I was to give you, if we were to give you if I was to give you answers to your satisfaction, though, of how it would work, the honest answer is I'd have to be honest about it and say that I have no guarantee that this system, that this business model, or how this is security or roads, or how a shoe store would be run would work that way, because we legitimately don't know how the market would work or what technologies the future would bring. So it's not a cop out. It's just a fact. It's an honest answer, though. But we can give principles. And again, I don't see, like in this case, I would say that if your interpretation of the non-aggression principle, I would say, is really opens the door for it to be meaningless. If it allows, if you, of course, in your cases of duress or achieving happiness. Though I can say, you can easily just make the case that we have to provide taxation for education, because, a world full of stupid people can be hell too. In case, if you cannot provide a way for them, just give me an exact answer for just how it will be provided without the states. And yeah, that's all I have.
All right.
Okay. Did you want to take 2 minutes extra or not?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, I'm first pointing out here the contradiction that you noticed, and this happens all the time with all these debates with anarchists. First, Eric was claiming that you could not know, and Jeffrey Tucker claimed specifically that you could not know whether all the defense agencies, DROs, would have the same legal code. or not. But in this debate, Eric admitted that it's obvious that they would have different legal codes and that there would be alliances based on all sorts of different values, and that these legal codes would all be different. And so you can know a lot about how things would be. That's one of the things you can know. So you say that you can't know, then you admit that you can know. That's a point-blank contradiction. Now you say that my view of Knapp is meaningless. I don't see why you say that. It applies to the context that it's meant to apply to, and it doesn't apply to extreme duress. And if you knew that, you would be able to save your life if you ever encountered this situation, and you better figure it out before you get into a situation like that, because once you're in that situation, you might not have the time or energy to figure it out. But obviously, if you pick suicide, you would be violating your ultimate value, and it would be the biggest mistake you made in your life. So understanding the context that it doesn't apply to extreme duress is helpful, and you would understand that if you knew the hierarchy of where this principle fits in the rest of an integrated ethics. I gave you a schematic of where it fits and what it's trying to protect, and why it's trying to protect judgment. I explained that. So that's your lead. If you want to read a essay on this subject, you can read Objectivist Ethics. That would help you identify the fact that you cannot start a philosophic or ethical position anywhere in the middle without knowing where the beginning is. And the beginning of ethics is, what is your ultimate value? All the other principles and values have to be means to that ultimate end. When they aren't, they're no good. They're mistaken. Respecting the property rights of the guy with the water is a mistake, and you pay for it with your life because you didn't integrate your ethics. And this is what happens a lot with anarchists. They have a rationalistic attitude towards philosophy, which is instead of a rational attitude towards philosophy. Rationalism is when you pick a principle, let's say Knapp. You say, that makes sense, and then you start to deduce. Well, if that's true, then this is true, and if that's true, then this is true. This is called rationalism. It conflicted with empiricism in the 17th century. Two false dichotomies in philosophy, both mistaken. The right procedure is to identify the right starting point. So you build and you know where you are at every point of the hierarchy, because knowledge is hierarchical. And Knapp is not a starting point. It's not an irreducible primary. It has a purpose and a context, and within that purpose and context, it works perfectly well. It's not meaningless. It works very well. Now, what you fail to understand, and most anarchists fail to understand, is the difference in providing a service of education compared to providing a service of protection of individual rights, where you have to use major physical force, militarized force, to enforce the protection of rights. The difference in the nature of the service is why what's a good principle in capitalism and all the other areas, and works very well, and why education should be privatized, does not work well with, in this situation, I lost my train of thought there. What was I saying? It works well in one situation, but not in the other. Anyway, I want to get back to some of the important points. Well, one of the things I wanted to say is, obviously, education would be superior if it was privatized. It has none of the problems that providing the security and protection of the individual rights of the citizens have, because it doesn't involve the implementation of major force. That's the whole difference between these two services. That's something that the anarchists don't grasp because they're rationalistic. They say, well, if it works well in the free market, it's got to work well in everything. But guess what? When it comes to using major force, it's a different ball game. It's a different kind of service. And that's why you have to make the distinction. Now, some other important points that we need to identify is that a lot of anarchists say, well, I'm not advocating for anarchism now. I think there should be a transition. We have to work these things out. No, I'm arguing here in this debate that anarchism right now in America is no good, and that limited government is the optimum. In some other scenario in the future where everybody becomes an angel and they all believe in respecting everybody's individual rights, who knows how the situation will be. And that was the ultimate disappointing end in the debate with David Friedman. It turns out that he didn't want to have anarchism now. He wanted to have a transition where his arbitrating committees would figure out what the best law would be ultimately to clear up all these contradictions and conflicts between people that have ascribed to different kinds of laws, and ultimately the battles, physical battles, because these people do have militarized force. So when they disagree, you have the risk of civil war, mini wars, etc. So some of the basic negative consequences that I point out in other debates, which I did in this debate, but just for a refresher, is I explained why it incentivizes crime. We went through the fact that unaffiliated, weak individuals and agencies are easy prey because now their government, with the major monopoly of force, is not protecting them. That without a government, more firepower increases your pool of victims. So there's an incentive under anarchism for there to be an arms race. More firepower increases how many people you can extort and rob from if you're a criminal. And the security agencies have to do the same thing. They have to militarize up. And when there's conflicts between, potential conflicts between security agencies, they soon realize that the one with the most militarized power, most firepower, the most military hardware is top dog in an anarchist society, because nobody will force them to do anything. That's the point. And the arbitrator won't force them. It's a different situation. Might makes right under anarchism. It is, as I've said before, the law of the jungle. The person with the more firepower rules. Instead of, the anarchists are always complaining about they don't want any rulers. Well, with anarchism, you're going to get rulers from every which end. There's going to, because everybody that has more militarized force than you can force you to do whatever they want unless you are affiliated with somebody who will actually go to war for you and not permit the abuse. As I said before, because all these people have different legal codes, under anarchism you can't even know what the law is going to be. The first requirement to have your individual rights protected is not to run afoul of the law for no good reason. In order to not run afoul of the law, you need to be able to know what the law is. And in an anarchist situation where you have, could be even hundreds of different security agencies with different codes, And all these people are living in the same territory. They're not segregated like I said they should. The anarchists should segregate so that they can have their anarchist society, which they're not interested in having. If they're not segregated, they're all mixed up together in the same bar, in the same restaurant, in the same town. You don't know what law you're supposed to follow. And it's very easy to run afoul of the law. I explained how different legal codes would protect your right to have an abortion, others wouldn't. Some would be in favor of pedophilia, would be perfectly legal. Others would say no. Some would have one statutory rape age. Others would have a different one. There would be conflicts on everything in criminal law and criminal procedure and civil procedure, in tort law, contract law, and every goddamn kind of law. If you've ever seen a law library, there's plenty of stuff to disagree on. Well, you don't know what the law is on any point, and so you're much more likely to run afoul of the law under anarchism. So, what are the premises that lead you to have a mini war? People will disagree about right violations. There's thousands of disagreements in our country every day. And guess what? We are a litigious society. And people disagree about all sorts of things. It only takes a small percentage of people or agencies to resort to force to start a war. And you don't have to have everybody to resort to force. You just have to have a small percentage. And now you already have a little war right there in your neighborhood. So, some people will defend against the party that used force, like I said before, and this creates a little war. And these little wars drag in other people, their allies, their friends, and they can wind up into a civil war. And finally, I like to say that under anarchism, you really have no way of defending clearly against tyrants. David Friedman's solution was he was going to depend on charity and on people's interest in having fun playing war games. Look, your security is too important to let it lean on a weak rod of charity. I want to live with people that are willing to pay to have themselves defended, not with people that want to be free riders and get the service for nothing. It's too important to leave up to charity. Now, you want to try that out in an anarchist society? Great. And I'd be interested in seeing how it works out. But finally, I'd like to say I want to wish Eric as much progress as possible in his philosophic development, and I want to thank him for doing this debate. And I want to excuse myself with the audience for the technical flaws that we had in this debate. But I do want to commend Eric on being amenable to discussing his philosophy, and I'm sure that ultimately that will pay off. So thank you, Eric.
Okay.
Final last words, Eric?
Well, I guess for the debate format, I guess I can't, I already said my summary, but I can gladly save that for the second round at a later date. So.
Well, if there's something you wanted to say, it's okay. We'll vary by mutual agreement, we'll vary the format. And
okay.
It didn't take as much time as I did.
Okay. Well, I will say for that, when I said that there would be, when I did agree there would be multiple legal codes, though I mainly said there really is nothing that would, by law, that would prevent them. And that one thing,
you agreed that it would be in all probability that they would have different legal codes. You'll check the tape when you.
Okay. Well, there'll be more than one, but as far as thousands upon thousands, probably.
I didn't say thousands. But anyway.
Or a lot of them, but
different anarchists have different views about how many
I think the market
Rothschild
would
thought that
single
300 would be a reasonable ballpark. Who knows? Nobody's saying that we all know how many there's going to be, but it's definitely going to
and
be
and
many.
I'll say, and I guess I'll say one more thing as far as the principle of non-aggression principle. I think from this, how to apply that in cases like if you were for the case of the case of just hiking in the woods and find this other person's water with this. I think the proper thing to do is in this case for me to prepare ahead of time for hiking. We're carrying extra water, having a make sure my phone with my GPS is charged, so I wouldn't have to get lost or whatever. And that would be more optimal than just in cases where I would violate someone's rights. And that's
But Eric, do you deny that it's possible that that could happen?
um, do I deny that? Well, that would be, I guess, about the same. In my that I would actually encounter that in my life the same time I would have, I mean, Sophia Vergara just go on dates and make passionate love to her. That's about the same odds to it. That would have happened in that case. That I would get lost and find someone that would not give a dying person water. In this case, is very unlikely.
They could have a very good reason for not wanting to share their water. Maybe the water is scarce. They don't have much themselves. They can't spare it. Have you ever thought of that?
Well, then I would probably not. Then that's a good. That might be a chance too. That's operable, but still, still not too likely though.
No, it's not a likely situation, but the point is it is possible, and other situations similar to it are also possible, and it's good to straighten out your thinking so that if you, by chance, unlucky chance, end up in a situation like that, you'll know what to do. You won't have to try to figure out, maybe I should review my ethics and see how I apply where this principle fits in the rest of my ethics, and know what to do in this kind of situation. Anyway, I want to thank Kwang Lee for being the moderator.
Yes.
And if he has anything he would like to say, we've come to an end of this debate.
Yeah, like listening to this debate. Hey, Jan, I want to challenge you to debate as like devil's advocate for anarchy and how it's inevitable and unstoppable. Basically, it's already here. Actually, I would like to.
I didn't hear you too well. Can you say that again?
Hey, I would like to challenge you to debate as a devil's advocate for anarchy. Actually.
Oh, you want to do devil's advocate against me?
Yeah, as anarchy and how like anarchy's already arrived already and it's unstoppable. Actually, it's just gonna get to deal with it.
Okay, well but is this your genuine held belief, or you want to do devil's advocate? I prefer
it's actually my belief,
people.
but I just saw the paradox between the republic and an anarchy society, and I just would like to.
Well, we can discuss that.
So we can arguing about this topic from now on.
We can discuss that later if you want, but
yeah, actually, it is my
moderator. May I ask a question to Klein real quick? I don't know what position you were already on before watching this. I just asked, were you swayed to go either way from limited government to anarchy or anarchy back to limited governments from watching this debate?
Well, like I'm actually a Republican advocate for Republican government because that's the best government for protecting property rights, but anarchy is just the natural state of the Uniform Commercial Code and like treaties and destruction of nation states and mega corporation formation, multinationals anyway. So I'm advocating for a Republican government, but like the governments are basically going to collapse in the cyberpunk 2015 wormhole, and the corporations are going to rule the day it's pursuing anyway. So it's like my position, and that's anarchy or piracy, the law of piracy.
Okay, well, that was a good question, Eric, and I want to thank you again and Quang Li. So I'm going to finish the debate with the permission of both gentlemen. I appreciate it and hope to get the comments from the viewers. Bye.
Okay.